The chamber of the Galactic Assembly was built to make visitors feel small. It floated above a blue-white star, ringed by thousands of levitating platforms. Each platform held a delegation: ancient empires, war-bred species, machine minds older than planets. Their combined presence pressed down like gravity. At the center stood one figure. Humans. No armor. No escort. No weapons. Just a simple dark uniform, hands folded behind his back, posture calm. His name was Envoy Elias Ward, representative of Earth. He had crossed half the galaxy to speak for a species most of the assembly barely remembered. The charges echoed through the chamber in a dozen translated frequencies. Noncompliance. Technological concealment. Refusal to submit defensive oversight. The High Arbiter, a towering being of crystal and light, leaned forward. Humanity, the Arbiter said, voice cold and amplified, has benefited from assembly protection for centuries. In return, you will surrender all classified defense systems for review and control. Every delegate expected the same thing they always saw from young species: fear, bargaining, apology. Envoy Ward did none of it. He raised his head and met the Arbiter's gaze. Earth declines, he said evenly. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Some delegates laughed, sharp, clicking sounds. Others whispered in disbelief. The Arbiter's glow dimmed. You misunderstand, it replied. This is not a request. Ward nodded once. We understand perfectly. The chamber fell silent. Sensors recorded elevated heart rates across multiple species. This was not how these moments went. Humanity was small, late to the stars, bound by treaties they barely understood. They were not supposed to say no. The Arbiter spoke again, slower now. Then you accept the consequences. Ward did not flinch. Earth accepts responsibility for its decisions. That was the moment the Assembly decided. The vote was instant. No discussion. No hesitation. Execution. A punishment reserved for rebels, warlords, and species meant to be erased from history. A containment field snapped into place around the Envoy. Energy bands locked around his limbs, lifting him off the platform. His heartbeat spiked, but only briefly. Across the galaxy, the broadcast continued. Millions watched. On Earth, screens went silent in homes, command centers, and deep underground facilities as the feed cut to the Assembly view. No one spoke. No one moved. The Arbiter raised a crystalline arm. Let this serve as a lesson, it declared. No species stands above the Assembly. The execution beam activated. Light tore through the chamber. For a fraction of a second, Envoy Ward's face was visible, eyes open, jaw set, unafraid. He did not scream. He did not beg. Then he was gone. The containment field collapsed. Nothing remained. The Assembly moved on within seconds. New agenda items appeared. Trade disputes. Border conflicts. Humanity was already being filed away as a solved problem. But the galaxy noticed something strange. Earth did not respond. No emergency transmission. No threat. No demand for justice. Not even a protest. Hours passed. Then days. Alien analysts concluded what they wanted to believe. Humanity was shocked into paralysis. A fragile species broken by its first real loss. Fleet patrols relaxed. Trade lanes reopened. The Assembly congratulated itself on restoring order. On Earth, the sky looked the same. Cities glowed. Oceans moved. But deep beneath the surface, systems awakened. Ancient vaults unlocked. Long-dormant shipyards powered up in the dark between stars. Command codes that had never been used were entered without ceremony. There were no speeches. No public announcements. Only quiet orders. Far from Earth, an old alien archivist watched sensor data scroll past his station. Warp signatures flickered. One, then another, then dozens. Human designs. Modified. Advanced. Too advanced. His breath caught. These aren't evacuation ships, he whispered. Across assembly space, listening arrays began to overload. Space itself bent in unfamiliar ways. Something vast was moving, but not toward Earth. Toward them. At last, a message arrived at the assembly core. It was short. Human encryption. No visual feed. Just text. Receipt confirmed. Nothing else. The Arbiter stared at the message, confused. Receipt of what? Before anyone could answer, long-range sensors screamed. Human fleets were emerging from warp, dozens of systems at once. Not forming lines. Not posturing. Deploying. The assembly chamber filled with alarm tones. For the first time in its long existence, the Galactic Assembly felt something new. Uncertainty. And far away, on a silent world called Earth, a single command was passed from human leadership to the waiting fleets. Not a speech, not a threat, just one word. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant. Silence spreads faster than panic. In the minutes after the human fleets appeared, the Galactic Assembly did not scream. It did not flee. It froze. Across the core systems, command stations flooded with data, warp wakes, mass readings, power signatures that made no sense. Human ships were not arriving in neat formations or traditional invasion patterns. They appeared alone, or in pairs, sometimes entire squadrons emerging inside gravity wells that assembly doctrine declared impossible to navigate. Every arrival rewrote a rule. The Assembly's Tactical Council convened in an emergency session. Holographic projections of human vessels rotated in the air, dark, angular hulls with no visible insignia. No broadcast codes. No identification beacons. They are violating engagement protocol, one admiral snapped. They are ignoring it, another corrected. Weapons officers attempted target locks. The systems hesitated, recalculated, then failed. Human ships drifted just outside optimal firing ranges, close enough to threaten, far enough to remain untouchable. It was deliberate. They aren't attacking, a senior strategist said slowly. They're positioning. That word unsettled the chamber more than any explosion could have. Positioning meant intent, patience, confidence. Across the Assembly's outer defense ring, a patrol fleet finally acted on its own authority. 3 cruisers advanced on a solitary human ship hovering near a communications relay. Warnings were transmitted in every known language. The human vessel did not reply. The cruisers opened fire. Energy lances crossed the void, precise, powerful, designed to cripple shields and force surrender. They struck the human ship dead center. Nothing happened. The shields did not flare. They did not absorb. The energy simply vanished, as if swallowed. Then the human ship responded. No warning. No escalation. A single pulse rippled outward. Not light, not heat, but pressure. Space folded inward for a heartbeat. The 3 cruisers ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Not shattered. Gone. The relay station behind them went dark as well, torn apart by forces its designers never accounted for. The human ship returned to stillness, weapons cold. Across the galaxy, analysts replayed the data in horror. That wasn't a weapon, one whispered. That was a statement. The Assembly tried to regain control. Emergency messages were sent to allied fleets, to client species, to anyone with a military presence. But responses came back fragmented, delayed, or not at all. Human ships were everywhere. Not swarming. Not overwhelming through numbers. They were overwhelmed through placement. Each one sat at a strategic artery, shipyards, command nodes, hyperlane junctions. They did not blockade trade routes. They did not stop civilian traffic. They cut only one thing: authority. On Earth, there was no cheering, no celebrations. The execution of the Envoy had not ignited fury, it had triggered resolve. Human leadership met in a secure chamber buried beneath layers of stone and shielding. Faces were calm, voices measured. The Assembly will try to negotiate, one commander said. They always do, another replied. After they lose control, they'll ask what we want. The room fell quiet. Finally, the senior coordinator spoke. We already answered that question. The others nodded. Back in Assembly space, the first official response arrived. A transmission from the Arbiter itself, formal, restrained, dripping with forced calm. Humanity, it began. The Assembly acknowledges the unfortunate outcome of recent events. We are prepared to discuss terms to prevent further instability. The message was broadcast on open channels, translated for every species. The galaxy held its breath. The reply came seconds later. No visuals, no diplomatic framing, just text. The negotiation window has expired. Fear rippled through systems that had never known it. Species that once mocked humanity now scrambled to distance themselves from the Assembly. Fleets withdrew. Defense pacts were quietly dissolved. Old grievances resurfaced as ancient rivals sensed weakness. Human ships did not intervene. They let the collapse happen. Inside one Assembly-controlled fortress world, a governor watched the sky from a balcony as a human vessel drifted overhead, silent and immense. "They haven't fired," the governor said. "Why don't they fire?" An aide swallowed. "Because they don't need to." That realization spread like a disease. Humanity was not here to punish randomly. They were not acting out of rage. They were dismantling a system, one node at a time. The assembly attempted one final show of strength. A consolidated battle group, larger than anything fielded in centuries, jumped toward a human-held junction. The engagement lasted 37 seconds. Human ships did not outgun the fleet. They outthought it. Gravitational traps collapsed formations. Electronic warfare blinded targeting arrays. Precision strikes removed command vessels first, leaving the rest leaderless and panicked. When it ended, the surviving ships fled in disarray. The assembly had lost its last illusion of control. In the ruins of the core, the arbiters stood alone, light flickering. They were supposed to be compliant, it said to no one. They were supposed to be grateful. A final human transmission arrived, routed directly to the assembly chamber. This one included visuals. A single human figure appeared, an officer, uniform unadorned, expression steady. "You executed an envoy," the officer said. "You believe that act would enforce obedience." The arbiter straightened. "What does humanity seek now?" The human did not hesitate. "You taught the galaxy that power decides who lives and who speaks," the officer said. "We listened." The transmission cut. Moments later, assembly sensors detected massive energy buildups across human positions. Not chaotic, not rushed, synchronized. Across the stars, civilizations realized the truth too late. Humanity was not responding to an insult. They were correcting an example. And whatever came next would not be limited to fleets or borders. It would redefine who was allowed to judge another species at all. The galaxy waited, trembling, as human weapons began to charge, not for war, but for erasure. The first world to fall did not burn. That confused everyone. It was an assembly logistics hub, massive, fortified, orbiting a yellow dwarf. Millions lived there. Shipyards, archives, academies. The kind of place the assembly used to prove its permanence. Human fleets arrived without ceremony. No warning shot. No declaration of intent. They simply arrived. Assembly commanders scrambled, expecting orbital bombardment or planetary strikes. Evacuation orders jammed channels. Defense grids powered up, drawing energy until the planet's magnetic field trembled. Then the human ships did nothing. They hovered in precise positions above the planet's poles, equator, and major orbital nodes. Their drives emitted a low, constant hum that sensors struggled to categorize. Minutes passed. Then the world changed. The planet's shipyards shut down first. Power drained, not explosively, not violently, but completely. Fusion cores went dark. Backup systems failed to engage. The energy was not stolen or destroyed. It was disconnected. Across the surface, assembly command staff watched in disbelief as their most secure installations went silent. Weapons refused to fire. Shields collapsed into inert shells. "What is this?" one officer demanded. "An EMP?" "No," a scientist whispered, staring at cascading diagnostics. "It's more fundamental. They've rewritten the operating constants." The planet was still alive. Cities still glowed faintly. The population was unharmed. But the world was no longer part of the war. It had been removed. Across the galaxy, the same pattern repeated. Assembly worlds were not annihilated. They were neutralized, stripped of military relevance, severed from command authority, rendered harmless without a single civilian casualty. Panic spread faster than destruction ever could. Species that once feared the assembly now realized something worse. Humanity could end wars without fighting them the way wars were understood. An emergency conclave formed among non-assembly powers. Old rivals sat together for the first time in centuries, watching human fleet movements in shared silence. "They're not conquering territory," one delegate said. "They're amputating power. And they're doing it surgically," another replied. "They know exactly where to cut." The truth emerged slowly, painfully. Humanity had studied the assembly longer than anyone suspected. Every doctrine, every protocol, every failsafe. They knew which worlds mattered, and which only looked important. On Earth, historians had warned for generations that the assembly's greatest weapon was not fleets or laws, but precedent. the ability to execute an envoy without consequence. That precedent had now been challenged. Not with outrage, with finality. Inside a human command vessel positioned near the assembly core, officers monitored operations with quiet efficiency. There was no cheering when another assembly system went dark. No satisfaction, only grim focus. Their response options are collapsing, an analyst reported. They've lost 60% of centralized control. Civilian impact? A commander asked. Minimal. We're keeping collateral at near zero. Good, the commander said. That matters. A junior officer hesitated. Permission to ask a question, sir? Granted. Why not end it faster? We could erase their fleets outright. The commander looked at the hologram of the galaxy. So many lights, already dimmed. Because this isn't punishment, he said. It's education. Back at the assembly core, chaos reigned. Delegates shouted across the chamber. Old enemies blamed one another. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for weapons long forbidden. The Arbiter listened, light flickering erratically. They are dismantling us without killing us, it said slowly. Why? No one answered. Then a junior archivist spoke, voice shaking. Because if they destroyed us outright, we would become martyrs. Silence followed. They don't want the galaxy to fear humans, the archivist continued. They want the galaxy to stop trusting us. That realization hit harder than any weapon. Reports flooded in from former client species. Assembly authority had collapsed overnight. Governors resigned. Fleets defected or disbanded. Treaties were ignored for the first time in recorded history. Without the Assembly's threat of enforcement, the galaxy began to change. And humanity was letting it happen. The Arbiter finally authorized a last resort, Project Continuum. A classified network of autonomous war constructs designed to preserve assembly dominance even if leadership fell. They were ancient, powerful, unethical. They activated. Human sensors detected them instantly. So they chose ghosts, a human tactician murmured. The constructs emerged from hidden vaults across multiple systems, their signatures warping space itself. They did not hesitate. They attacked everything human. This time, humanity responded differently. Human fleets moved together, not scattered, not surgical. Unified. The engagement was brief but violent. Human ships adapted in real time, altering formations, rewriting tactics between volleys. Where assembly constructs relied on brute force and overwhelming firepower, humans relied on coordination and sacrifice. One human ship took a direct hit meant for a civilian world, its hull tearing apart as it absorbed the blast. Escape pods launched, but not all. The galaxy watched the footage. Humans died, not as invaders, as shields. The constructs were destroyed within minutes. But the damage was done, not to humanity, to the Assembly's narrative. The Arbiter stared at the casualty reports, light dimming. They protect even those who never protected them, it whispered. Another message arrived from humanity. This one was not encrypted. It was broadcast openly, to every listening species. A human voice spoke, steady, controlled, unmistakably tired. We did not come to rule you, the voice said. We came to end a system that kills envoys and calls it order. Images followed, archival footage of executed diplomats from countless species across history. Faces erased, names forgotten. You told the galaxy this was necessary, the voice continued. You told them fear was peace. The final image showed the human envoy, moments before his death. Calm. Unbowed. We disagree. The transmission ended. Across the stars, species made choices. Some openly renounced the assembly. Others offered support to humanity, not as allies, but as witnesses. A few still clung to the old order, desperately hoping it might survive. It would not. In the depths of assembly space, the Arbiter stood before an empty chamber. Platforms once filled with power now sat dark and abandoned. For the first time, the assembly understood its mistake. It had mistaken restraint for weakness. And now, the species it executed had become the standard by which all power would be judged. Far from the core, human fleets began a slow, deliberate advance inward. Not rushing, not hesitating. The galaxy realized the truth at last. Humanity was not finished. They were just done being patient. The assembly tried to speak with one voice again. It failed. What remained of its leadership scattered across encrypted channels. Each faction convinced the others had already betrayed them. Orders contradicted one another. Fleets received recall commands and attack directives within the same minute. Entire squadrons shut down their drives rather than choose. Humanity watched the confusion unfold and did not interfere. That restraint unsettled the galaxy more than violence ever had. A surviving assembly tactician, old enough to remember the first human treaty, reviewed the patterns in private. Human fleets had not advanced blindly. They had paused, allowing rumors to spread, alliances to crack, fear to ferment. They're letting us collapse under our own weight, the tactician realized. Then the next phase began. Across multiple sectors, human ships transmitted identical navigation pulses. Not an attack, a summons. The pulses mapped safe corridors through contested space, routes that bypassed assembly checkpoints entirely. Civilian traffic was noticed first. Merchants rerouted instinctively, following the new lanes. Refugee convoys followed. Entire populations moved without realizing they were obeying a human plan. The assembly's toll gates sat and used as commerce flowed elsewhere. Within days, the assembly economy suffocated. "You can't blockade what you no longer control," a human logistics officer said quietly as reports came in. "So we made them irrelevant." Desperation finally forced the assembly to do what it had not done in centuries. It asked for mercy. A formal transmission was prepared, language softened, historical authority emphasized, blame shifted to rogue elements. The execution of the human envoy was framed as an excess driven by procedural rigidity. The arbiter rehearsed the words carefully. They were never sent. Before the transmission could launch, a human vessel appeared directly above the assembly core. Not at the edge of the system, not at a safe distance. Directly above. Security protocols screamed. Defensive arrays spun up, but targeting failed instantly. The ship was too close, too precise, as if it had always known exactly where to be. A channel opened automatically. The same human officer appeared again. Same uniform, same calm expression. "This is not a negotiation," the officer said. "This is a notification." The arbiter bristled. "You dismantle order and call it justice." The officer did not raise his voice. "You dismantled trust and called it peace." A pause. "Your authority ends today." The channel closed. Around the core, assembly defenses shut down, not by force, but by command override. Codes older than the assembly itself executed flawlessly. Systems obeyed humanity as if they had been waiting. Inside the core, panic became reality. Delegates fled their platforms. Some begged for evacuation. Others demanded execution of remaining human assets, as if violence could restore a past that no longer existed. The arbiters stood still, light flickering. "How did they get our codes?" it asked. An archivist answered in a whisper. "They didn't get them. We gave them centuries ago, in fragments." During oversight, the assembly had demanded access to human systems. Humanity had complied. Selective, incomplete, patient. They had hidden keys inside compliance. The human vessel above the core did not fire. Instead, it released something else. Data. Across the galaxy, sealed archives unlocked. Records long buried became public. Executed envoys, erased species, suppressed technologies, engineered wars disguised as arbitration. Every civilization saw the truth at once. The assembly was not peaceful. It was controlled. Riots erupted on assembly worlds. Governors resigned. Some committed suicide. Others tried to flee, only to find human ships blocking exits, not with weapons, but with silence. "You may leave," human transmission stated. "You may not command." The distinction mattered. As the assembly's influence evaporated, a final contingency triggered. Deep beneath the core, an ancient failsafe awakened, a weapon built not to win wars, but to deny victory to anyone else. A stellar implosion device. If activated, it would collapse the star beneath the core, erasing the system and everything in it, including billions of civilians. The arbiter felt the system activate and finally understood the assembly's true legacy. Fear, preserved at any cost. "Stop it," the arbiter ordered. The system ignored it. Human sensors detected the energy spike instantly. In the human command vessel, alarms sounded, not frantic, but sharp. "Stellar collapse is imminent," an analyst reported. Assembly deadhand protocol. The commander closed his eyes briefly. So they chose extinction. Human fleets moved. Not away. Toward the core. Calculations ran at impossible speeds. There was no time to evacuate the system. There was barely time to intervene. One option existed. It would work. It would cost lives. A human captain volunteered before the order was spoken. My ship can reach the ignition lattice, she said. We won't make it back. The commander hesitated for exactly 1 second. Proceed, he said. The human ship accelerated beyond safe limits, tearing through space as assembly defenses flickered uselessly. It slammed into the lattice at the heart of the device, deploying a containment field never meant to be used on a star. The explosion did not consume the system. It consumed the ship. The star stabilized. The core survived. Silence followed. Across the galaxy, the footage spread, human engineers calculating, human crews bracing, human lives given not to destroy, but to prevent annihilation. The assembly's last weapon had failed, not because it was weak, because humanity chose to stand in its way. The Arbiter watched the remains of the lattice drift into the star's light. They would rather die than let us take others with us, it said, voice dim. What kind of species does that? In answer, a final human message appeared, broadcast everywhere. We ended your authority, the voice said. We will not inherit it. No threats followed. No declarations of rule. Human fleets began to withdraw, slowly, deliberately, leaving behind a galaxy in shock. But before the last ship jumped away, a single marker was left near the core. Not a weapon, not a base, a memorial beacon. It carried one name, the Envoys, and one line beneath it. Executed once, answered forever. The galaxy stared at the empty space the humans left behind and understood something terrifying and new. Humanity had proven it could erase civilizations. Instead, it had chosen something harder. Now, every species had to decide what to do with a future no longer ruled by fear, and whether they deserved the mercy they had just witnessed. The galaxy did not celebrate. It reeled. With the assembly gone, there was no explosion of joy, only a vast, trembling uncertainty. Borders that had been fixed for centuries suddenly meant nothing. Treaties written in fear lost their teeth overnight. Species that had lived under enforced peace now faced one another without an arbiter to hide behind. And through it all, humanity did nothing. Human fleets withdrew to distant holding positions, far from capitals and trade hubs. They did not patrol. They did not intervene. Their silence was deliberate and deeply unsettling. On dozens of worlds, emergency councils formed. Leaders argued late into the night, voices raw with panic. Without the assembly, war is inevitable, some said. Without the assembly, we finally have a choice, others replied. Both were right. Old grudges resurfaced almost immediately. Border skirmishes broke out between rivals who had been restrained for generations. A mining dispute escalated into orbital fire. A religious schism ignited violence on a moon that had never known war. The galaxy was slipping. Human observers watched the data streams carefully. They're testing the absence, an analyst said aboard a human command ship. They don't know what replaces the assembly yet. The commander nodded. And if we step in too early, we become it. That was the danger humanity feared most. Becoming the thing it had destroyed. The decision was made quietly, without ceremony. Humanity would not govern the galaxy, but it would not abandon it either. The first human intervention came without weapons. A disputed system on the edge of former assembly space erupted into full conflict between two species that had been forcibly kept apart by assembly decree. Within days, civilian casualties mounted. Both sides accused the other of preparing genocide. Human ships arrived unannounced. They did not take sides. They positioned themselves between the fleets. Weapons powered down. Shields up. Silent. Both sides fired warning shots. The shots vanished against human defenses. A channel opened. Open frequency, unencrypted. A human voice spoke, calm and clear. We are not here to decide who is right, it said. We are here to ensure you survive long enough to decide for yourselves. One of the alien admirals sneered. By what authority? The reply came instantly. By the authority you gave us when you proved no one else could be trusted with it. Silence followed. Human ships deployed something new. Not weapons, but structures. Autonomous platforms unfolded in space, projecting containment fields that separated forces, enforced ceasefire distances, and blocked heavy weapons fire without targeting anyone directly. A neutral zone. Temporary. Transparent. Voluntary. Step back, the human voice said. Or continue alone. The fighting stopped within hours. Across the galaxy, the message spread. Humanity would not rule. But it would not allow slaughter to fill the vacuum. Not anymore. Some species welcomed this with relief. Others bristled, accusing humanity of hypocrisy, of enforcing peace by strength, just as the assembly had. The difference was subtle, but profound. Humanity did not punish disobedience. It withdrew. In systems where local powers rejected human mediation, the fleets simply left. And when violence followed, humanity did not return to stop it. The galaxy learned quickly. Peace imposed was fragile. Peace chosen was rare, but stronger. Meanwhile, fragments of the old assembly tried to regroup. Former officials, military remnants, ideologues who believed order required fear. They gathered in secret, pooling resources, whispering about restoring what was lost. They called themselves the Continuity. Their plan was simple. Blame humanity. They seeded propaganda across recovering networks. Stories twisted. Footage edited. The Envoy's execution was reframed as necessary discipline. Human intervention is painted as manipulation. They destroyed order, the messages claimed. Now they pretend to be saviors. For a time, it worked. Doubt crept in. Species that had lost stability questioned whether the assembly, cruel as it was, had at least kept the peace. Human intelligence detected the pattern. This time, humanity did not send fleets. It sent evidence. Entire assembly archives, unedited and censored, were released publicly. Not selectively. Not weaponized. Everything. Execution records. Suppressed species files. War-for-profit arbitrations. The Continuity's leaders were named, their signatures visible across centuries of crimes. The galaxy saw the truth with its own eyes. The Continuity collapsed within weeks. Some leaders were arrested by their own people. Others vanished into exile. A few chose death over exposure. Humanity did not pursue them. It didn't have to. In the aftermath, something unprecedented happened. Representatives from dozens of species requested a meeting with humanity, not to submit, not to beg, but to ask a question no one had ever asked before. How do we build something better? The meeting was held in neutral space. No grand chamber. No execution platforms. Just a wide, empty expanse with simple stations linked by open corridors. Human delegates arrived without guards. So did everyone else. The discussion was chaotic, painful, honest. Some demanded a new central authority. Others rejected the idea entirely. Arguments flared. Accusations flew. Humanity listened more than it spoke. When it finally did, the words were simple. There should never again be a body that can execute an envoy and call it law, a human representative said. Beyond that, the galaxy must decide for itself. What if we fail? Someone asked. The human did not answer immediately. We fail all the time, he said finally. The difference is whether failure teaches us or hardens us. No constitution was signed that day. No new assembly formed. But something shifted. Local councils emerged. Regional accords. Voluntary coalitions based on shared values, not fear of punishment. Messy. Imperfect. Humans. And humanity stayed at the edges, watching, advising when asked, stepping in only when extinction loomed. Years passed. The execution of the human envoy became a turning point taught in academies across the stars. Not as the start of a war, but as the end of an era. Children of species once silenced learned a new lesson. The power that must kill to be obeyed is already dying. On Earth, a small memorial stood overlooking the ocean. No grand monument. Just a stone marker with a name few outside humanity recognized. Envoy Elias Ward. Below it, a single inscription. He spoke. They killed him. We listened. Far above, human ships continued to patrol the dark, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. The galaxy was freer than it had ever been, and far more dangerous. Because now, every species knows the truth. There was no assembly to blame, no authority to hide behind, only choice. And somewhere in the vast silence between stars, humanity waited, not for obedience, but for the day the galaxy would no longer need anyone like them at all. The galaxy learned to breathe again. Slowly, unevenly, painfully. Without the assembly's shadow, trade resumed along new routes. Local coalitions formed, dissolved, reformed. Some worlds thrived. Others struggled. Conflict did not vanish, but it changed. Wars were shorter. Atrocities were harder to hide. There was no central authority to legitimize cruelty with a seal and a vote. And humanity remained exactly where it had promised to stay. At the edges, human fleets did not expand. They did not fortify territory. Their presence became rare, seen only when extinction-level events loomed. When they appeared, it was never dramatic, just decisive. Years passed, and memory began to soften. New generations of alien leaders rose who had never known the Assembly's executions firsthand. To them, the old order felt distant, almost theoretical. Human intervention became history instead of warning. That was when the first real test arrived. In a spiral arm far from Earth, a rising power called the Virex Compact began expanding aggressively. They were young, technologically gifted, and convinced the galaxy's new openness was a weakness. They absorbed neighbors through protective annexation, dismantling local councils and replacing them with loyal governors. At first, no one stopped them. Why would they? There was no assembly anymore. Refugees fled Virex space by the millions. Testimonies flooded open networks. Cultural erasure, forced relocations, planetary sterilization disguised as economic restructuring. The galaxy watched and hesitated. Some worlds quietly armed themselves. Others argued intervention would only recreate the old system. A few hoped the Virex Compact would burn itself out. Human intelligence watched everything. They're recreating the assembly, an analyst said aboard a deep space station. Just smaller. Meaner. The commander frowned. Have they executed an envoy? Not yet. Humanity waited. The moment came in a fractured world called Lath Prime. A coalition of smaller species sent a joint delegation to negotiate with the Virex leadership. Not to threaten, not to demand, only to ask for limits, to preserve autonomy. The meeting was broadcast publicly. The Virex leader listened, expression bored. When the envoys finished, he smiled. You mistake freedom for permission, he said. The envoys were arrested on the spot, executed within the hour. The footage spread faster than light. Across the galaxy, something old and terrible stirred. On Earth, the response was immediate, but not loud. Human fleets moved. Not many, just enough. The Virex Compact noticed human ships entering nearby systems and laughed. Their propaganda networks lit up. The ghosts of the old war return, the broadcasts mocked, still pretending to be guardians. Humanity did not reply. Instead, a single message was sent, open, public, unaltered. You have crossed the only line that matters. The Virex leader scoffed. And what will you do? He demanded in a return broadcast. Erase us like you erased the assembly? The human answer was different this time. No, the voice said. We will stop you. Then we will leave. What you become after that will be your choice. The Virex Compact mobilized everything it had. They believed, as so many before them had, that humanity's restraint meant limits. They were wrong. The engagement did not resemble the fall of the assembly. There was no systemic dismantling, no quiet suffocation. This was a wall. Human fleets formed a cordon around Virex expansion routes and did not move. When Virex ships advanced, they were stopped, disabled, not destroyed. Engines cut, weapons locked down, crews left alive, drifting until recovered by their own people. Every attempt to escalate failed. The Virex leader raged. You cannot hold us forever. The human response was calm. We don't need to. Behind the cordon, the galaxy reacted. Worlds once too afraid to resist the assembly now found courage in numbers. Local coalitions formed overnight, not to conquer, but to contain. Trade embargoes snapped into place. Information flowed freely. Refugee worlds were supported instead of abandoned. The Virex Compact found itself isolated. For the first time, it faced consequences without annihilation. Months passed. Internal dissent grew. Governors questioned orders. Military commanders refused suicidal offensives. The Virex economy cracked under pressure. It could not deflect with fear alone. Finally, the Virex leader demanded talks. Humanity agreed. The meeting was held in open space, witnessed by dozens of species. No execution platforms. No armed guards looming overhead. The Virex leader arrived furious and left shaken. You could have destroyed us, he said, voice low. Why didn't you? The human representative answered honestly. Because then the lesson would belong to us. he said. "This one has to belong to you." The Virex compact withdrew from occupied systems within weeks. Some leaders were overthrown by their own people. Others faced trial and regional courts formed without human involvement. Human fleets withdrew as promised. The galaxy watched them go. Something profound settled into collective memory. Humanity did not punish ambition. It punished one thing only: the belief that power granted the right to silence another voice forever. Years later, historians would mark the Virex crisis as the true end of the Assembly's legacy, not its destruction, but its philosophy. Fear was no longer sustainable. On Earth, the memorial by the ocean remained unchanged. Wind and salt wore on the stone. Children asked who Elias Ward was. They were told the truth. He was a man who spoke calmly to power, parents said, and showed us what that costs. Far from Earth, a young alien diplomat stood before a newly formed regional council. Her voice trembled, but she spoke. No one executed her. No one threatened her. They listened. Humanity watched from the dark between stars, fleets quiet, weapons cold. They did not know if the galaxy would succeed. But for the first time, success was possible. And that, more than obliteration, was Earth's final answer. Time did what fleets could not. It turned certainty into memory. Decades passed after the Virex crisis, and the galaxy entered a strange, uneven age. There was no single name for it. Some called it the Open Era. Others called it Fragile Peace. Among humans, it was simply known as After. The galaxy learned without a ruler. Some regions flourished. Trade networks grew dense and resilient, built on mutual benefit instead of enforced routes. Cultures once flattened by assembly standards bloomed again. Languages revived, customs returned, identities reclaimed. Other regions failed. Without an authority to fear, old hatreds sometimes burned unchecked. Small wars flared and burned out. A few worlds collapsed entirely, undone by leaders who mistook freedom for immunity. Through it all, humanity stayed true to its promise. It did not intervene often, but when it did, the reason was always the same. Someone had crossed the line. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Human fleets never appeared to seize territory. They never arrived to collect tribute. They came only when a voice was silenced permanently, when envoys were executed, populations erased, or extinction declared policy. And every time, the response was proportional, contained, and final. Predators learned to recognize the signs. So did victims. A quiet phrase entered galactic language, translated imperfectly but understood everywhere. The humans are watching. It was not a threat. It was a fact. On a remote station orbiting a dead star, a group of alien scholars gathered to compile what they called the Record of Turning Points, a living archive of events that reshaped galactic norms. At its center was one moment above all others: the execution of the human envoy. They replayed the footage frame by frame. The calm posture, the refusal to beg, the absence of rage even at the end. One scholar paused the image just before the beam struck. He knew, she said softly. Knew what? Another asked. That this would not end with him. Elsewhere, less thoughtful minds watched the same footage and drew different conclusions. In the outer dark, beyond established routes, a coalition began to form quietly. Not an empire, not an assembly, a contingency. They were species that feared humanity, not because of what it had done, but because of what it could do. To them, restraint was not mercy. It was a strategy. They believed the galaxy had simply traded one invisible ruler for another, and they intended to test that belief. They called themselves the Axiom Concord. Their doctrine was simple: no single species should ever hold the power to define moral boundaries, especially not one capable of enforcing those boundaries with fleets no one could stop. They did not execute envoys. They did something worse. They erased them. A diplomat from a border world vanished en route to negotiations. No broadcast, no execution footage, just silence. Then another, then three more. The world panicked. Accusations flew. The Concord denied everything. Human intelligence noticed the pattern immediately. Disappearance instead of spectacle, an analyst reported. They're avoiding the trigger. The commander studied the data. They think the line is technical. And they're right, another officer said. By our rules. Silence settled over the command deck. This was the danger humanity had always feared. Not open cruelty, but clever cruelty. The question reached Earth's highest council within hours. Do we intervene anyway? The debate was the most difficult humanity had faced since the fall of the Assembly. If they acted, they risked proving the Concord correct, that humans had appointed themselves judges of all morality. If they didn't, they risked allowing a new system of terror to grow in the cracks. What was the promise? One counselor asked. That we would stop extinction, another replied. Not injustice. And if injustice becomes extinct by increments? No one answered immediately. The decision came from an unexpected place. An archivist. She had spent her career preserving the raw records of the Assembly era. Unedited, unfiltered, painful to watch. She spoke quietly, but every word landed with weight. The Assembly believed executions were efficient, she said. The Concord believes disappearances are safer. Both rely on the same lie, that fear works best when unseen. She looked up. Envoy War died in public. That mattered. The Council understood. Humanity would not strike the Concord. It would expose them. Human fleets moved, not to Concord space, but around it. Sensors mapped hidden routes. Data probes followed whispers. Networks were infiltrated patiently, methodically. Then, one day, the galaxy woke to a flood. Every disappearance is documented. Every erased name is restored. Every secret detention site is mapped and broadcast. Faces appeared on screens across hundreds of worlds, alive, imprisoned, waiting. The Concord's moral high ground collapsed overnight. Member worlds panicked. Some withdrew immediately. Others turned on their leaders. Civil unrest spread faster than the Concord could suppress it. The Concord demanded to know why humanity interfered. The human response was public. We did not punish you, the message said. We made your actions visible. What happens next is not our choice. Within weeks, the Concord dissolved itself to avoid civil war. Human fleets withdrew again. The galaxy absorbed the lesson slowly, uneasily. The line humanity defended was not a rule. It was a principle. If you kill a voice to preserve power, humanity will stop you. If you silence a voice and hide the body, humanity will shine a light. Beyond that, the galaxy was free to fail or succeed on its own terms. On Earth, the memorial overlooking the ocean received a quiet addition. Not a new monument, just another line carved beneath the first. Power fears witnesses. Children who visited asked why humanity didn't rule when it clearly could. The answer was always the same. Because ruling is easy, they were told. Living with restraint is harder. Far out in the dark, human ships drifted in long orbits, systems humming softly. Crews aged, retired, replaced. The watch continued across generations. Humanity did not know how long it would need to stand guard. Maybe forever. Maybe only until the galaxy learned to guard itself. Either way, the lesson endured, etched not in law, but in memory. There would be no more assemblies built on fear. No more Concords hiding behind silence. Because once, long ago, a single human stood alone in a chamber of gods and said no. And the galaxy never forgot what happened next. The watch did not end with humanity. That truth emerged quietly, almost unnoticed, as decades turned into a century. Human fleets were still there, older now, designs refined but familiar, but they were no longer alone. Alongside them drifted vessels of other origins. Not warships, observers, witness craft, neutral platforms crewed by mixed species who had grown up in the after and understood its cost. They called themselves the Accord of Witnesses. There was no charter carved in stone, no central command, no executions. Membership was voluntary, temporary, and revocable at any time. Their only shared purpose was simple: to ensure that no voice vanished without record. Humanity had not founded the Accord. Humanity had inspired it. The galaxy did not suddenly become just. Cruelty did not vanish. Power is still tempting. But something fundamental had changed, something predators found difficult to adapt to. They could no longer rely on silence. The final crisis did not begin with fleets. It began with a vote. In a prosperous world named Kareth, a regional council convened to address resource imbalance. The language was sterile, bureaucratic, and carefully legal. The affected minority species, migrants from a long-dead system, were labeled unsustainable. No executions were ordered, no weapons fired. The council voted to revoke their planetary status. Relocation followed, then containment. Then, optimization. The witness accord flagged the pattern within days. Human analysts reviewed it quietly. They're not killing them outright, one officer noted. They're starving them, fragmenting families, dispersing identity. Genocide by erosion, another said. The human commander leaned back, eyes closed for a long moment. Has an envoy been silenced? Not yet. Then we do not move, he said. The accord disagreed. For the first time, the witnesses acted without waiting for humanity. Mixed species craft entered Kareth space openly, broadcasting live. Cameras streamed conditions from containment zones. Testimonies spread across networks faster than sensors could react. The Council of Kareth denounced it as interference. The witnesses did not argue. They recorded. Public pressure mounted. Trade partners hesitated. Allies distanced themselves. Within weeks, Kareth's economy staggered under the weight of attention. The Council rescinded the vote. The minority survived. Human fleets never moved. That was the moment the galaxy understood. Humanity was no longer the sole line. It was an example. Not everyone accepted this new reality. Far beyond the main spiral, in a region scarred by centuries of unrecorded violence, an old empire watched the changes with disgust. They had survived the assembly by staying quiet. They had avoided humanity by staying distant. They believed the galaxy had grown weak. Their rulers convened and made a decision rooted in ancient instinct. They would end the witnesses. Not with spectacle, with speed. A convoy of witness craft disappeared in a remote corridor. No signal, no debris, no survivors. Then another. Panic rippled through the accord. Some members withdrew immediately, fearful. Others demanded protection. All eyes turned, inevitably, to humanity. The question came without words. Would they act now? The human command received the data and said nothing for 12 hours. Then, human fleets moved. Not to the Empire, to the space between. They formed a boundary, wide, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. No shots fired, no messages sent, just presence. The Empire reacted with fury. You have no authority here, their ruler broadcast. Withdraw or be treated as hostile. A human reply came at last. Measured. Public. You destroyed witnesses, the message said. That is an act against the future. We will not allow it to stand. The ruler sneered. And if we refuse? The answer was not immediate. When it came, it was quiet. Then you will stand alone. What followed was not war. It was abandonment. Trade collapsed as neighboring systems severed ties. Information networks locked the Empire out. Even longtime rivals refused alliance, not out of fear of humanity, but fear of exposure. The Empire lashed out, seizing nearby systems. Human fleets did not engage. The Witness Accord did. Not with weapons, with truth. They released archives, records of the Empire's history, long-hidden massacres, erased cultures, suppressed revolts. The data had been gathered slowly over decades, patiently, carefully. The galaxy saw the pattern. Rebellions erupted inside the Empire within months. Entire provinces declared independence. Military units refused orders. The ruler's authority disintegrated faster than any bombardment could have achieved. In desperation, the ruler ordered executions, public ones. The footage spread instantly. Human fleets moved. This time, there was no boundary, no warning. Human ships entered the capital system and shut everything down. Not destroyed, disabled. The ruler was arrested by his own guards before human forces ever landed. The trial that followed was not human-led. It was galactic. Witnesses from dozens of species testified. Survivors spoke. Records played. The ruler was sentenced, not to death, but to life imprisonment under observation. No martyr. No myth. Just accountability. Humanity withdrew again. Years later, a historian would write that this was the last time a would-be tyrant believed silence could save them. Because the galaxy had learned something irreversible. Power that cannot hide cannot endure. On Earth, the memorial overlooking the ocean weathered storms and time. The stone was worn smooth now, the name still legible. Envoy Elias Ward. Visitors left offerings, not flags or weapons, but recordings. Messages. Testimonies from across the stars, archived freely, permanently. A place of witnesses. A child once asked a human guide why the envoy's death still mattered so much after all these years. The guide thought carefully before answering. Because he didn't die to start a war, she said. He died to prove one was unnecessary. Far above, in the endless dark, human ships continued their long watch. Fewer now. Older crews. Some missions are crewed jointly with other species. The watch was no longer heavy. It was shared. Humanity did not know if the galaxy would ever reach a point where no one needed to stand guard. But it knew this. As long as someone tried to rule through silence, there would be witnesses. And as long as there were witnesses, there would never again be an assembly that could execute a voice and expect the universe to look away. That was the final legacy of Earth's answer. Not obliteration, but the end of permission.